Madam President, standing up here to discuss an insurance bill brings back memories. I served as the House ranking member of the Insurance Committee for a number of years, and this legislation that is before us tonight is something that I'm quite familiar with, and we've had many debates over the years. I think it's worth noting, actually, that this legislation has never made it over the finish line, and I think that's for good cause. I am certainly sympathetic to the comments made by the chairman of the Insurance Committee, who clearly is desirous of a policy to benefit patients, and so am I. I guess the question boils down to what really benefits patients. Is it the availability of nothing but brand name expensive drugs, or is it affordable health care? As was described, what this bill before us essentially does is it eliminates the ability for an insurer to use step therapy in certain circumstances. And just for the edification of people listening, step therapy is the process by which we try less expensive solutions before the most expensive solution. That means generic drugs or orally taken medication versus injected medication, or drugs manufactured in one place versus another that might have the same effect or impact or effectiveness. And in this particular case, we are changing the current law, which is limited to the elimination of step therapy only for a very specific thing, and that is for those individuals that have been diagnosed with stage 4 metastatic cancer. And as I mentioned, this legislation has been debated many times in the House and Senate and in the Insurance Committee, and it never seems to make it over the top because somewhere along the line, reasonable people say, we can't do this. As much as we want to do this, we cannot do this, and we should not do this. And it all comes back to premiums. I'm a real estate agent, so people say, location to me all the time, and I know exactly what that means. But when it comes to health insurance, at the end of the day, it's premiums. And what's ironic to me is that I come into this chamber all the time and hear debate about people working hard for our constituents to make healthcare access more affordable and open to more and more people. And I have no doubt that everyone in this chamber wants that, including me. But at the same time that I hear people proposing that we need to reduce the cost of health care and insurance and provide more access, I also see bills like this. Because this bill essentially has the effect of reducing access to health care and raising premiums. And I'm going to just say that this is never an easy question. We debate insurance mandates in here on a regular basis, and every insurance mandate sounds great. That's something that is a law, effectively, in English. That if you say, I'm going to provide a new additional insurance protection for people that buy this insurance policy, it always sounds good. Of course it's good, it's more insurance protection. But what we forget when we have that conversation sometimes is that every time we add a new mandated insurance protection and tell our insurers they have to cover this new thing, they obviously are going to charge for it. Back in the day, when there were a lot of insurance companies used to actually compete with one another by trying to run responsible and efficient organizations and insurance companies, because they were trying to sell product and still make a profit, but still beat out their competitors. But over time, this body and the federal government have essentially destroyed that system, because what they've done is eliminated competition by essentially creating what the insurance policy is that must be offered to every consumer. So no longer can one insurance company offer a tailored insurance plan for someone or simply offer a schedule of options to someone so that they could choose what coverages they want and pay only for those coverages. More and more, this body and the federal government mandate coverages and say these things have to be included in every policy. And simultaneous to that, the cost goes up, and the cost goes up, and the cost goes up. And we've already voted on quite a few mandates just this session, and every one of them was good. No question about it. New coverage for all kinds of things. I think we did one on breast cancer screenings. I think we did one on bariatric surgery. I don't even know. There's probably even more than that. One thing I've been arguing for years is that we ought to actually sit down and figure out the cost of every one of these mandates and figure out which ones actually make sense so that we can actually start getting rid of some that are less important than others. But sadly, insurance mandates perform a lot of services in the political world. Instead of just allowing consumers to work with their own insurers to decide what coverages they want and pay only for those coverages, these mandates are always portrayed as if the people voting for them are the kindest, most decent souls on the planet, granting gifts of more insurance coverage to anyone lucky enough to live in their district. And in fact, if you were foolish enough, since I've been here anyway over the last 12 years, to say, you know, I really want to offer that additional coverage too, but if I do this, that means that every one of my constituents has to pay a higher premium. You were vilified. Every campaign, you'd have a nice mailer. Senator so-and-so voted against whatever insurance mandate, risking life and limb for his constituents because he does not care. It's insane because it's also extremely irresponsible. That's something that the chairman of the insurance committee just mentioned when he talked about why this is needed. He said, because the current policy is irresponsible. Well, I would argue that getting rid of the current policy would be irresponsible because we're going to be increasing insurance premiums so dramatically if this becomes the law in Connecticut. It will shock people. And insurance premiums are already shocking. I could go into a lot of detail about the actual coverage in front of us, but I just want to say a few things. Doesn't it make sense, first off, to allow someone to try a lower dose of a medication before going up in dosage? Yes, of course it does. But that may not happen if this becomes law. Doesn't it make more sense for people to be able to try the generic drug first before going to the super, super expensive drug? Of course it does. Doesn't it make sense for someone who takes a drug that might be available in both an oral form or an injectable form to try the oral pill first before going to the more expensive injectable form? Yes, it does. But again, I'm worried that if we do this, that won't happen. I'm also concerned about what happens to people on the street. The people I represent who send me here for one purpose and one purpose alone. They don't send me here to make a political vote. They do not send me here to do what sounds best. They don't send me here to say, hey, Rob, whatever you do, make sure you vote for whatever I'm going to think sounds better. No, they vote for us because they trust us to make good policy going forward. That's why we have a representative form of government. If we had a true democracy...
Madam President.
Senator Looney.
Point of order, Madam President. I believe that the senator in his comments referred to this item for some parts as a political vote. I think that is improperly characterizing the motives of members in discussing the bill, and I would urge that the chair caution him in that regard.
Thank you, Senator Looney, and the chair takes that point of order extremely seriously. And Senator Sampson, if you would please confine your remarks to what is in the legislation that is before us, and let us not impugn motives of any member. Thank you.
Duly noted, Madam President. I don't agree, but I won't debate the fact, and I will stick to the letter of the bill. As I pointed out, I have a concern about what happens on the street, and that is what happens when someone has a $5,000 deductible, say, and they end up going to the pharmacy, and they've been prescribed only the brand or the brand name drug because that's what is required by this legislation. Would they still be offered the generic drug? And what happens when they're paying out of pocket up to their copay? I'm afraid they're going to end up having to pay the larger premium. I guess one other thing I want to say, I just want to make a couple of other points. As I said, I'm a little rusty about insurance legislation, and I trust that the ranking member, Senator Wong, will come back and fill in the holes that I have left out. But I just want to say a couple more things. One is, when we pass legislation like this, it's remarkable that we rarely hear that it affects a very small amount of the population. Because this particular legislation only affects two statutes. I believe they are 38A-510 and 38A-544, which are our individual and group plans in the state. But that omits a huge number of people. Everyone who is in a self-insured plan across the state of Connecticut is not included in this legislation. And I often consider whether or not we ought to put amendments on it to make that across the board. But then I say to myself, why would I want to create that problem for even more people? I guess what I want to say about this policy more than anything is that while it seems like it's good intentioned, and in fact the people that are proposing it may very well see it that way, I don't believe it is good intentioned. I believe what happens is you end up driving premiums up to the point where you cause people a hardship that they can no longer afford to buy the important insurance protection that they desperately need. And I believe step therapy was created for the purpose of giving people options so they can still afford the very important health care that they require. I want to also say that in our current statute, there is a very, very, very important provision which is being ignored right now. And that is that right now, today, a physician can override the step therapy that an insurance company has offered to their patient. That is covered in 38A-510. Any such override process shall be convenient to use by healthcare providers, and an override request shall be expeditiously granted when an insured's treating healthcare provider demonstrates that the drug regimen required under step therapy, A, has been ineffective in the past for treatment of the insured's medical condition, B, is expected to be ineffective based on the known relevant physical or mental characteristics of the insured and the known characteristics of the drug regimen, C, will cause or will likely cause an adverse reaction by or physical harm to the insured, or finally, is not in the best interest of the insured based on medical necessity. That covers it. That covers the whole thing, top to bottom. Step therapy helps keep premiums low, and doctors have the power to override it if they believe it's medically necessary. There's no reason to pass such a large insurance mandate that will drive up premiums to the point where fewer people will be able to buy insurance protection, Madam President. I encourage my colleagues to do the responsible thing and vote no.